Today's episode is episode 368. And if you were to just look at the fact that it's episode 368, you probably wouldn't think it's a milestone episode for me. However, you would be wrong because this episode marks the first of a new era of this podcast for me. And the reason for that is because I'm going to send a little announcement, which is I have officially joined the HubSpot Podcast Network. I'm really excited about it. It feels so good because at the very beginning of this year, told myself that I really, really want to get paid to podcast. I really want my podcast to become more central as a part of my marketing, as a part of how I connect with others, how I teach, how I share, how I curate, how I do all the things. And so the fact that I was approached by HubSpot a couple months ago and was invited to be number 37 in their podcast network, I am just over the moon. And so what's been cool, it's been hard to keep this secret for as long as I have. But what's been cool is I actually went to Podcast Network a couple weeks ago and got to meet some of the other creators as well as some team members from HubSpot. And it felt like home. And the reason it felt like home was because I love diverse thought. I love diverse perspectives. I love being in rooms of people who are different than me, who have different experiences and education and lessons that they've learned, because I'm not going to grow as a human, as someone who is looking to reach their full potential. I'm not going to grow if everyone around me is exactly the same as me. And so this network has done an excellent job, in my opinion, on curating very diverse thought leaders, very interesting perspectives across multiple areas of the business to business arena. And I'm just thrilled that I get to be a part of it. So it also is an honor because I actually use HubSpot myself in my business. So that was doubly fun, right? Because I believe in the product. I use it myself. I'm a huge advocate for HubSpot, and it is definitely a software and tool as a systems person that I will put my name, behind. So that is my announcement. And with that announcement, I thought it would be interesting to share my podcasting journey because it probably isn't what y'all have expected. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you then know. However, if you're new to this podcast and you're just listening, then it may be of interest to you. So I started this podcast back in 2016. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was recording using, I'm pretty sure, those like white Apple headphones. Didn't even have an official microphone. And I just started interviewing people that I knew. So I wasn't really thinking and capitalizing on the fact that I did have a podcast. I just thought this is a cool way to connect with people, leverage my network, and also to actually work on my public speaking. So that's really allowed me to get rid of a lot of likes and ums, and not that they're entirely gone. However, they have definitely polished up because I talk so much on my podcast. And so naturally, those things kind of just wash away as you get more and more into the podcasting space. So in 2016, I did my first quote unquote season of the podcast, and it was, maybe 20 or so episodes. Again, it was all people I knew. So I hadn't pitched anyone really outside of my network. And that was my first season. Like it was what it was. I will never go back and listen to my first episode ever, because I probably would get rid of the entire first season, not because of my guests, way more because of me and how unpolished I probably sound and whatnot. But I've actually gotten a lot of feedback that, again, people who've actually gone back all the way back to the very beginning, 300 and some episodes back, they actually say that my podcast is really still relevant in a lot of ways, which I love and I would agree with, but to each his own. So 2016 and 2017, I was doing my podcast and I would do kind of batch seasons, and I made it a really big event in the sense of I would film all of them and I would do little, what are they called? Collages, video montages. That's what they're called. And I would use them as hype videos because people were like, oh my gosh, you would do, 20 to 24 episodes every time I did a batch. And it was a really cool way to drum up interest, intrigue, something that my guests could be proud of and share with their audiences. And it was a lot of fun. Now, do I batch that way now? No, I do not. So it's a little bit more on time and whatnot, which I actually really enjoy. But I will say that around 2018, I started to make some changes with my podcast in the sense that I was now getting pitched to have guests on my podcast. People were recognizing the value of being on my podcast. And so people wanted to be on it. And so whether it was pitching agencies, whether it was people pitching themselves, it started to become like a whole thing where I then was having to decide, okay, the people I want on, I'm going to have on. And then also I'm going to bring people on that I don't know. And that was really cool because it, again, extended my network. It allowed me to leverage those relationships in different ways. It allowed me to celebrate and get to know new people. And that was really great because I don't know about y'all, but when you're in business and you're trying to connect with somebody, if you're just trying to get a coffee chat or connection in some way, most people don't have time for that. However, if you have a platform or an asset like a podcast or like a blog or like a YouTube channel, then people are more likely to say yes to you because you have that platform. And so knowing that, I actually use that to, my benefit in the sense of connecting with people, ask them to be on my podcast, and then we got to talk in between, episodes. So that's really what 2018, I would say 2018, 2019, and 2020 were. So also during that period, I had renamed my entire business System Save Me. So during the first few years, my business name was different than my podcast name. However, I was noticing that people weren't using my business name to, when they were mentioning me, they actually mentioned System Save Me Jordan Gill. So I was like, okay, well, why do I even have another business name if people are just going to use my podcast name? So I decided to go all in on the System Save Me name, and I do not regret that. It is trademarked, registered, fully mine, and I'm really proud of it. And actually the origin story of the podcast name was from Regina of By Regina. If y'all follow her, she actually named my podcast. It was like some naming service or offer that she did. And I just like, I don't know, it was like $150 or something where I paid her. And then she was in charge of naming the podcast and then also suggesting the topics and the categories that I could talk about on my podcast. I'm actually going to go and find that document. It would be really fun to look at. I'm sure I have it somewhere. And so 2018, my business name and my podcast name are one and the same. 2018, 2019, 2020, I would do these batch weeks still. I would connect with people who were interested in being on the podcast. So new friends, also friends of mine that I knew for a while. And then I would say end of 2020, early 2021, if I'm being really honest, which I am, I got really bored. So it felt like I was talking about the same things. It felt like everyone was pitching me the same things. It felt like I wasn't able to actually leverage my podcast in the way that I wanted to leverage my podcast because it felt like I had to say yes to these pitches or I had to meet enough new people in order to fill the roster of these big batch weeks. And it wasn't exciting to me anymore. And even when I looked at the data, which I always do, when I looked at the data, I wasn't getting clients from the podcast. Like I wasn't getting really anything out of the podcast. I wasn't getting to know new people that I really wanted to get to know. I wasn't really leveraging it in the way that I had been previously. I wasn't getting leads, sales, clients from my podcast at all, really for the first 5 years. So that's when I made the decision, which again, I feel like most people would tell you to not do this, but YOLO. I actually took a hiatus of my podcast and said, you know what, I'm just going to take a break. I didn't know how long the break was going to be, but I knew that I needed to step away in order to get re-inspired, re-energized. And I knew the moment of me coming back would be really clear to me. So I didn't force it for any reason. I didn't get stressed out about it. I just like let it lie over there. And that was for a year and a half. And so it kind of chilled over there. Honestly, I kind of forgot about it. And then I would say end of 2022, like what are the years? End of 2022, I actually started craving it again. And I realized kind of what was stirring up for me was the fact that I wanted to share my voice more often. I had a lot to say. And the reason I had a lot to say was because I had been focused between 2020 and 2022 entirely on selling my Done in a Day group coaching program for VIP days, which was awesome and a really amazing season for me. And it really limited what I was able to talk about. And I put that limit on myself because I wanted to hit the goal. I had objectives. I had, things I wanted to accomplish. And so instead of muddying the waters and talking about all the things, I literally just talked about VIP days for 3 years straight. So once I decided in October, November, December-ish to not move forward with selling my Done in a Day program anymore, then it really opened up like, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? Because I'm still going to be in business. So I got to figure out what the heck I'm going to say. And I kind of molded over a little bit and really thought about, okay, what is exciting me right now? What could I share? And immediately I thought, I want to get back on the podcast and I want to use my voice and I want to use my platform for beyond what I've talked about previously. So I had this idea to start doing solo episodes to just like warm myself back up and not get back into like the batching of guests. And I didn't know when I was going to bring guests back on and whatnot. I've only brought one guest on at this point. So I started off by doing a batch of 4 episodes, and I filmed it actually during my, second year wedding anniversary. We go to Mexico every year, and, my husband goes off and does something. And so then I just literally brought, again, my good old, Apple white headphones that plug right into my phone. And I recorded 4 new episodes. And it was kind of scary because you're like, hi, I'm back. Listen to me. Remember me? I'm like super fun. You used to subscribe to my podcast. So I tried to be strategic with those episodes. I tried to think about as much, like, again, if somebody only listened to my podcast and didn't follow me on Instagram or didn't get on my email list or whatever else, then they have no idea what happened to me in the last like couple, year and a half ish. So I decided to create 4 episodes. I talked about my biggest mistake of 2022. I talked about, again, why I wanted to bring back the podcast. I shared about what I'm most looking forward to in 2023, all those sorts of things. And what was so cool was that I, posted all the episodes January 1st, and I dropped all 4 at the same time. And then I started to do, I think, just weekly after that. And what was so cool, so when I left the podcast in the hiatus, I probably had maybe 8,000 to 10,000 downloads a month, maybe. A year and a half later of literally not posting a single time, I came back, and my first month back for System Save Me was a 52,000 download month for my podcast, which was wild. I was like, where have y'all been? Like, what's happening over here? Like, if I had known y'all were still hanging out, ride or die with me, then maybe I would have been doing this podcast all along. But I think it was necessary for me to have a refresh. I think that it was important for me to step back. And I hope that that encourages you if you're feeling like you want to take a step back, that you want to hit pause, if you want to reassess, reevaluate, all of the re's essentially, that it's okay to. And like people will still be there. I don't know how many, right? I don't have a crystal ball, but there will be people who are still there and who are super excited for your return. So that really is my podcast journey. I've been solo podcasting since January, and it's been good. It's been really interesting to, again, take on all the episodes and have the inspiration to say enough, right? Because at a certain point, it's like, what else am I going to talk about? But somehow I always come up with episodes, and I've played around with 1 time a week, 2 time a week, 3 time a week. I did like a sprint of like 7 once. And I just wanted to play. Like, the podcasting arena is a really playful arena. And I think that there's a lot that you can do to spice things up, to enhance growth, all of that. And so what I've found so far is that for me, I focus so much on the retention of the people who are already listening that my downloads have decreased, as the months have gone by. And it's not like abnormal by any means. However, I have known that, again, I want to put efforts toward this. I want to grow the podcast. I want this to be a centralized arena for my marketing, for sponsorships, for all the things. So I, again, put it out there in January that I wanted to really ramp up the podcast. And so in June, when I was introduced to a HubSpot creator team member, and we had several conversations about the network, about my goals with the podcast, etc. It was a fit. Like, it was such a fit. And I'm so glad that I said yes. And they have been nothing but wonderful and gracious and kind and informative. I've learned so much already. And again, today is day 1, right? So I just am really excited. And I think that there's a lot that I have to learn about podcast growth. Again, I just went to Podcast Movement, learned a ton. And, this week I'm actually headed to HubSpot's Inbound Conference, which is literally, I'm flying tomorrow. And so if you are going to be hanging out at HubSpot Inbound, please come and say hi. I will be roaming the halls and hanging out and meeting people and learning stuff. So I'm really, really thrilled. I think that there's going to be incredible folks at the conference. When I'm around people who are in the HubSpot realm, the caliber of folks who have family values, but also are ambitious, I would say that's kind of my sweet spot is, I love my family. I love being around them. I want to spend time with them. And I also am ambitious. I also have goals and dreams and objectives. And the people that I've met so far in the Creators Network, the people who I've met so far who work for HubSpot, they've been nothing but wonderful. And they have also mirrored those values to me as well, along with diversity, along with, again, uplifting voices that are not normally heard, which is incredible. So that has been my podcast journey. I am really excited for the next phase, the next part in all of this, which will be some different types of episodes. I'm going to play around. Like I said, the podcast is kind of my arena to play and try new things. So I'm really excited to bring different types of episodes to y'all. And that'll be a mix of podcast guests. That will be a mix of what I'm deeming these like mini table talks, where I share a question with my community and then I source answers from them, and we create a really awesome episode where you get to hear from people who are in my community. So if you want to join that opportunity of mini table talks, then you can actually head to my Instagram, and right on the profile, there's a thing called Mini Table Talks Broadcast Channel. And you can just literally click it and join that channel, and you'll get notified when we have our next table talk, which is really dope. So I'm just overjoyed, and I hope that you can hear I'm like winded because of how excited I am. And it's just going to be such a wonderful experience. I already can tell. And I want this podcast to be in one of your favorites, one of the ones that you look forward to seeing my little podcast art on your notifications, and continuing to share, about systems, about ways that I navigate having a business online, ways that my guests are navigating podcasts online, and all of that stuff. So it comes down to wanting to curate really interesting, intriguing, different systems. Like, the systems that you don't even know about, right? Instead of the ones that are the most common. And so there's going to be a ton of curating of guests. So we will have an application, I'm sure, but I'm not 100% positive I'm going to really rely on that. I want to be in control of the content that I am putting out here. I want it to be grade A content. So I'm really excited about the curation process too. And I'm always meeting really amazing people who have things to share, and it's going to be a really fun ride. So if you, again, have been rocking with me since 2016 or even before that, I'm so grateful you're still listening. And if you're new, I'm so glad that you're here, and it's a great time to start listening. So I am going to be bringing tons of gems and guests as we move forward in the HubSpot era of my podcast. And I'm just so thrilled. So I'm actually going to put a little QR code here in the video. So if you want to go and subscribe, take a listen, give me a rating and review what you think, and I will be forever grateful. And like I said, if you're at HubSpot Inbound, please let me know that you're there so I can come say hi and, give you a hug, connect, all the things that are just my favorite when it comes to going to events. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and I look forward to the next episode.